Morning. Welcome to Stock Chartistry's midweek review. Let's take a look at what happened with the market yesterday. The market was a little flat yesterday. It didn't really seem like it was flat. It really felt kind of heavy. But as you can see from the charts above, basically we had a pretty flat day. When you look at the Dow, it really went from top to bottom here, and the NASDAQ had a kind of a wild ride, but ended up on the lows with a global bounce at the end of the day. S&P, for the most part, was driving down, even though we got a little bounce right here midday, but couldn't even come back up to the prior high like the NASDAQ did. And then the Russell just kind of stayed in range, basically stayed right in this kind of range right here. When we look at the advance and declining for the day yesterday, it was mostly declining. However, we are making new highs versus new lows, and the SMA 50 and 200 all remain positive. So once again, it was really just kind of a mixed day. Taking a look at the broad markets, you can see that when we take this and we look at a weekly charts, we're still looking at a very strong uptrend in pretty much all of the major markets. Bitcoin down here, obviously it's had some struggles, but you see this yellow line right here. This actually is a weekly trend line, and it feels like it's starting to catch some support off of there. Something we want to pay attention to is if it can go over this weekly close here and close above it, I think it's beginning to actually, it's possibly a turnaround story. Gold continues to go through the roof. Crude oil looks like it's trying to break out here of this downward trend line, and so it's popped its head up above, but it is going to see some resistance in this area right around here. And then TLT continues to be flat on its back. We take a look at the daily time frame to dive in a little bit deeper in the broad markets. You can see that actually, even though we're in a very nice uptrend for the SPY, this is actually the futures of the SPY, you're also losing some momentum here. And the problem with this is that this is what everybody commonly speaks to as being a bearish rising wedge. Usually this means that you're going to end up pulling back a little bit. But what most people don't talk about is that bearish rising wedges are actually productive, because it's going to be, it usually ends up resolving back after the pullback in the positive direction. Something that's really nice about the S&P right now is that after a few weeks of our last week's really nice showing, we got all of the SMAs are stacked. And you can see also that on my board here that the price is over top of all of the moving averages, and all of the moving averages are also sloping upwards. So the SPY looks really pretty good still. But taking a look at the NASDAQ, we have a similar pattern of a bearish rising wedge. And it actually has, it really hasn't done anything yet, because it still has this higher high up here, and it hasn't put in a new high. Whereas the S&P, you can see, has continually made incremental new highs. So the NASDAQ still has some work to do, but we are looking at positive slopes for the most part. It's beginning to turn around, it looks like, and prices above most of the moving averages. Moving over to the Dow has really been a beast, and you can see that it doesn't have that. It also is a bearish rising wedge. So all of the markets are somewhat in agreement with each other. However, the Dow's looks like it has more opportunity to move tighter into that apex. And then you have the Russell over here, and the Russell has been doing very well, but once again, this one is a little more. We're not so sure if that actually is a bearish rising wedge, because 2 points don't necessarily make a trend line, but that's possibly what we're looking at. We can, see what's going on with some further candles. But if you also look at the higher highs over here, once again, the Dow has really been a leader, which has been kind of surprising. The Russell is a little bit up and down. Here's a high, then it barely makes a new high, but then it makes a lower high, and then it makes a higher high. So it's a little bit of a wild ride, but all in all, the Russell seems to be trying to lead, with now we have the higher lows as well. So now moving on to Bitcoin down here, you can see that it's actually had a very difficult time here, but it has broken out of the downtrend line. It's created an equal high with the previous high underneath of the downtrend, and now it has a small doji over top of that area there. This possibly could be a turnaround story, so we're keeping an eye on this one to see if we can continue to gain some more momentum. Gold continues to once again go through the roof, and crude has done a very nice job of breaking this downtrend line and moving straight up towards the 200 period moving average. The slopes on all of these moving averages are basically neutral at this time, which is what you're looking for on turnaround stories. But then also your price is actually moved up above, so it's looking to try to pull those things up. You can see also that on the weekly, we're up 3.1% on crude. Gold is up 2.55%. And once again, I guess I should have talked about this over here, but Bitcoin is showing some strength this week, up being 5.5%. And then TLT, not much to say about this, continues to remain completely flat on its back. Now, if we take a look at the broad markets, you can see that Bitcoin is actually leading the way with gold following behind it. And actually, ARK is having a great week. This is actually sorted by what's actually happening right now today. So as of the pre-market, ARK is down slightly. But you can see that gold and Bitcoin are leading very strongly in the pre-market at this time. And then the rest of the pack it's down slightly today, but overall it's just basically flat if you look at that weekly stat, other than crude oil, which is up 3.16%, as I mentioned already. And if we go down here to the ETF markets, which pretty much follow the what's going on with the futures, we'll skip past that and then kind of focus down here on the sector. So once again, the sectors that are leading, interesting, so far this week, XLP is really strong. It's flat today because, it's flat right now because we're talking about 3:30 a.m. in the morning. So, it doesn't have much to say right now. There's not a lot of volume on that in the pre-market. But if you look, XLF, which JP Morgan just reported yesterday, I believe, it's actually down slightly. And you also saw Visa take a really bad hit yesterday as well. So, and other than that, we got of course, materials continues to lead the way. And interesting enough, XLRE, which is real estate, that actually is picking up a bid. Energy is picking up a bid for the week, and that's about it. All right, let's talk about the extended sectors. In the extended sectors, we're seeing a continuation of what we've already talked about, which copper is leading the way, and gold miners has done very well this week as well. Also, my Bitcoin miner derivative that I've been using to track, Amara, has really had an excellent week, along with Bitcoin itself. Once again, speaking to the idea that maybe Bitcoin is finally going to be a turnaround story. Gold, it did okay. It's doing okay so far this week, making new highs. And then XLB continues to actually run up also, which is commodities and materials. So it's continuing with that same theme. I do want to mention that the healthcare XLV, which has been pretty strong, say, for the last 3 to 6 months, has slowly been slipping down, and continuing to notice that it's beginning to have more and more money rotating out of it and into other things. I think we want to keep an eye on the technical trade because I believe that might be starting to turn around, but we're really needing to look at that in regards to, like, they're not everybody is actually turning around. Some stocks are turning around, some aren't. There's real winners and losers, it looks like, in this market right now in the tech field, and especially in the semis. Okay, if we take a look at the heat map over the last day, what happened yesterday, you can see that most of the Mag 7 stocks, were actually pretty flat. Apple, Nvidia, Tesla. And but you had also some serious losers as well. You had Microsoft here, and Meta took a big hit along with Amazon. But we also had some good winners, big winners too. We had Google, and then not part of the Mag 7, but we really got to speak about it just because it went up on such an extreme amount. We have Intel had an incredible day yesterday, and AMD also had an incredible day yesterday as well. So I wondered why AMD and Intel had such incredible days yesterday, and AMD actually had an analyst come out and say that the stock looks like it's has all kinds of opportunities to continue to sell chips for Apple, and that it anticipates it to be about 270. And then Intel also had that same type of news. But just now I noticed breaking news on NVIDIA is NVIDIA gets U.S. approval to ship AI chips to China, and now it's waiting on Beijing. So we'll definitely want to keep NVIDIA on our list for watching to see if this is actually going to give them the boost that they need to get out of that trading range they've been in since August. All right, so let's look at a couple of individual charts. We'll start with Apple. Apple seems to me like it's wanting to turn around. You have it right here where it's been in this range right here, but at the same time, you can see that it's really trying to actually begin to go up here, and that the moving averages are beginning to flatten or start to turn up. As you can see from my dashboard up here, this shows the moving averages and their slopes where they're turning up, and the price has actually moved over it. So it is interesting on a turnaround story perspective. It still has, when you look over here on the daily chart, you got this range of all kinds of activity that happened right in here, and that's going to cause some problems. So you don't have a lot of range that you can get up to. You also have this downward trend line right here that it hasn't broken through. And on the daily chart, all of the averages are actually moving down, and the moving averages are also stacked, as you can see from this label right here. So even though it looks to me like it's building a opportunity to be a turnaround story, there's not a lot of distance that it can go to. A better play for Apple is actually if it presents itself to go short. But if you're looking for a scalp into the long direction, then you possibly could pick up this area right here that looks to be a little bit open on the 4-hour chart. So you could pick up 3 to 5 points out of this area right here. So that's about all I got for Apple. When you go over here to AMD, this chart here is really beginning to look constructive. First of all, you gotta really appreciate this right here, that we are sitting here in a very nice bull flag on the 4-hour chart, and we have this huge area right here where there's just no volume. So that if it breaks through there, we're looking at a possible explosion. Of course, a beautiful move might be to break through and then to come back and retest and then break up. That would be awesome. But sometimes when it breaks through on these things, it doesn't give you the opportunity to do a retest. So you might want to really put this one on the radar. It looks very interesting to me. It has now broken down through this weekly downward trend line. And as you can see, that flag just looks awesome here going into the opening. All right, so let's take a look at Amazon. Amazon has been a real beast ever since it broke down through this downward trend line right here. And you could see on the weekly chart that it just put in this amazing candle 2 weeks later after it broke out, had a pullback to test the bottom, and then it just ripped off through zones and everything else. What I really want to see out of Amazon, though, is I want to see it break over this weekly high. That will then show me that it's wanting to continue to move forward in the upward direction. That's a big candle, so maybe we have a little bit of a pullback. But I'm looking, when you see higher weekly highs, for example, here, higher, then the stock's going to go up. When you have a lower weekly high, like you did with this red candle right here, it usually means that it's going to drop back. Lower weekly high right here, and we drop back. So I'll watch for, on these big candles like that, I'm looking for a weekly high. So for me, a long on Amazon is not in play until it gets over this zone. Moving on to Google, this stock here has just been a beast. If you look on the weekly chart, you can see that it had one momentum right here, but then around September or so, that momentum changed and it began even stronger right here. It might have been when the new Gemini came out. Speaking of AI, it has done an amazing job. It's now gone to all-time highs as far as the stock goes. And, we put in a doji right here. You can see that the RSI is kind of hot, but don't let that fool you. All of these magenta numbers or magenta dots that you see down here, this is on the 4-hour chart right here. Those are all showing RSIs that are over 70. And you can see what happens when RSI is over 70 and you're in a strong trend. It actually means that go and look for the moving average that's being respected. In this case, it looks like the 10 was being respected and definitely the 20. If it hits one of those moving averages, that's a low That's a low risk entry for you. You can see also here where it honored the 10 through here, and right now it's honoring the 5, but it looks like it's just now getting ready to lose the 5. So yeah, this is a great stock to look at buying. You can see on the 4-hour chart also that the moving averages are stacked. They're all sloping up. Price is above most of the moving averages. This little doji at this time portends that it may want to, come back and retest this breakout here. And then I would look for it to possibly go higher. A break of this line right here takes it out of play until it then resets itself. That's the weekly moving average there. So yeah, and Google's it's a beast. And it looks great. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the Bitcoin derivative, IBIT. Once again, this has begun to look a little bit better. It has broken the downward trend line, but even after it has done that, it has not really gone anywhere until really this week. You can see that it was kind of staying in this like zone right here. Right now, it's looking like that it really wants to change its pattern. You see the moving averages here on the daily chart, they've been flat, but with this most recent couple of pushes, the push here into the 50-period moving average, and now the push here into a prior higher low, if it can break that higher low, we do possibly look at something like this. And maybe now Bitcoin is finally going to start to pick up a bit. So Bitcoin is definitely on the list. If you look on the 4-hour chart, and that's how things work, as you begin driving higher and higher, you begin to see the moving averages change. So you can see on this 4-hour chart, when we look at the moving averages, the price to it and all that, the slope on every one of them now is considered up. It's even stacked in the 4-hour, which is quite an amazing achievement. And then on the hourly, we're looking pretty good, moving up in this range here as well. And you can see it's got a nice upward trend. Now, on the 15-minute, and the reason why I bring up the 15-minute is this might be one that's actually might be one that you might want to look at for a day trade. You're looking at a pretty nice little bull flag going on right here. A break above that bull flag puts you into this zone on the daily chart that is somewhat open. And you can even see from the weekly, we had a pretty open space there where it just kind of drove up. So IBIT definitely needs to be on your list over the next few weeks, and definitely on the list for today if you're looking to day trade. Intel has just been going crazy. Let's take a look at that chart, see if there's anything we can derive from this. You could see that the RSI on this one is just insane. It's 81%. But as I've mentioned before, as you're in a strong uptrend, that RSI can be very high, and you will continue to be in that uptrend as long as it's holding those 5 and the 10 moving average. So you look here, it held the 5, and you have the 10 more right about here. And of course, we have the 20. Basically, a pullback into the 20 on this was really just a beautiful buy right here, and even right here where you got that pullback. So as I've said before, when the moving averages are stacked, dips are actually pretty viable. So when you break that 20, then you got to actually start paying real attention. But I'm not talking about just a break. I'm talking about a break and a close down below the 20. So Intel looks very strong. It's been on such an incredible tear, as you can see from here, that it's really kind of hard to get into. But if you wanted to get into it on a daily time frame, you could try to actually pick it off right here on the 5-period moving average. And then you would have the next opportunity would be the 10-period moving average. And after that, because it's moved so hard, your 20 is only going to be about right here. So that's going to be a difficult one. I would actually, if it breaks the 10-period moving average, if you're trying to actually get a little bit of something on this, I would get out of it and wait for it to see if it actually recaptures the 20, or if it goes into the 20, recaptures the 10, or it goes down to the 20 moving average. I think the 20 moving average on a daily chart, as long as the narrative continues to remain the same, is viable. Microsoft also looks like it's actually a pretty good candidate for a short. We all had the exact same situation happen with it yesterday. It wasn't as clean a flag. I didn't end up catching this one, but you can see that it did flag down yesterday. Flagged down yesterday, and then today, as we're going in through the pre-market session, it is creating a flag. So that's constructive for a short. Also, you could see that it's right here along this. This is the 50-period moving average on the daily. And on top of that, it's been in this consolidation range here now since October. If it loses this consolidation range, it's going to take a pretty quick hike all the way down to probably about 448 pretty quickly. Usually the way these things work is if you're in a consolidation range and you break it, you'll end up matching that consolidation range. So you can see when we figured this out, it actually does. It goes right down to about 440, which is where I'm looking at a pivot on that weekly chart. And you can see it very clearly in the daily. You can also see that almost in every single time frame, your moving averages are looking terrible. Price is below, the slope is down, it's stacked in the wrong direction. So, yeah. So Microsoft is a short until otherwise notified. It's especially here when it's hitting a 5-period SMA, and you can see it's got really weak RSI. It could ride that 5-period right down. So you can put this on your list for a short. Don't get me wrong, if the market gets strong, you do have an air pocket up here up above. So if it decides to move up, you can always change your mind. Trust me, I change my mind as soon as the market tells me I'm wrong. Well, let's take a look at Netflix just for the heck of it. Netflix has just been terrible since earnings. And then also they had the announcement about buying Warner Brothers. It is right now in a bullish falling wedge. And once again, a bullish falling wedge does not mean that it's going to just shoot up forever, but it does portend that it's a possibility it could move up at least to this downward trend line before it continues down. For me, most of the time, bullish falling wedges, they are a continuation pattern in the negative direction. So you'll get the breakout to the up direction, but then the continuation be in the negative. And that follows suit because look at this. Look at this 50-period moving average. Look at this 20-period moving average, how terribly they're down pushing they are. Same thing with the 20 periods. Here. Same thing, I'll draw this a little bit better. Same thing with the 20 period right here. It's just coming down really hard and it's crossed over the 50. The 50 is even turning around. So this is a very negative story on Netflix. I do think Netflix in the long term is a buy. I'm thinking that it's actually going to set up. I'm wondering if it's going to set up right around this 80 mark as being a buy. But right now, if you're looking for a shorter term swing, it is a possibility this could bust to the top side. All right, let's talk about NVIDIA. This was my stock for the last 2 years that I consistently traded. The stock has really been stuck in this range right here since the beginning of December. And before that, it was already in a range on the weekly chart where you can see between essentially here between say 108, 190 and 170. It's really just been kind of going sideways. I do want to remind you that we have that news that is just broken about the fact that chips might become available in China. I am thinking that this stock here is really suffering from the idea that their margins are possibly going to collapse. I also have noticed in this stock that we're looking at a possible head and shoulders. You have the head and then the shoulders right here kind of match the shoulder right there. And then you have your neckline right about here. It's not a real clean neckline, or you might be able to draw that down here. Either way, what that's actually showing is that the lower highs never could reach the higher highs. And if you break down below that, that's when we're looking at possible capitulation. So another thing that's going on with Netflix is it's really been kind of hugging this weekly trend line right here that it's had forever. It's now slightly below it, if you look, right? And it's retesting the backside of it, but it hasn't broken enough to actually say that, no, we've given that up. So it's hanging on right now by its fingernails. It's really a stock to watch, especially not only if you trade NVIDIA, but also if you trade the stock market, since it's one of the largest capped stocks in the market. Of course, no analysis should ever be done without talking about Tesla. Tesla, had an amazing run earlier this year and the beginning of, the middle of November, and ran up on week by week basis, popped over the all-time high, and then it couldn't make another high on the week. And as I've mentioned, if you don't make another high on the week, then now you're a downtrending stock. That's just the way it is. And the daily chart has it lost the weekly trend line right here and then continued to move down on a pretty much every single day basis. It's recently picked up a bid here off of 423 area, and we have some pivot support here as well. It's the slopes on the moving averages are starting to flatten out. The 200-day is coming up in support. It is above the moving averages right now, but honestly, if you look at this, really, when I look at this stock, for me, it's, unless I'm day trading it, there's really not a lot to do here. This stock here is basically a doji, and if I look at it from this point here to this point here, and where we're at right now, you're basically in a doji since the beginning of November. So We do have a little bit of an upslope going on here, but as you can see, we got this downslope like this. So basically, that almost looks to me like basically an ABC pattern getting ready to play out, right? So if we do an ABC pattern on this, let's go ahead and pull that off the daily. Take an ABC pattern on this. Let's say that it stops right here. It's looking like going back down to the bottom here, which is about 380, or if it's a shortened ABC pattern, you're going to get down into the 400, 410 area. Now, I don't know that it's actually going to break. It has to actually break this trend line right here. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So it has to actually break this. Then an ABC is possibly in play. So right now, as far as like on the today's chart, you know, you're looking at somewhat of a bear flag on this as far as the pattern goes. So this also might be something to look at as far as being a support. I mean, being a short. You know, you do also have this this right here. When I see a blue line in my charts, it's basically saying that that's a daily move, that's a daily trend line. So it will find some support probably right here before it actually breaks down. Also on these patterns, a lot of times when you have a straight breakdown like this, the next breakdown actually ends up being somewhat choppy. So, and that's it for Tesla. And so yeah, let's take a look. We'll finally end this up here on Visa. Visa had a terrible day yesterday. The week, it's actually having a terrible week. You can see on the weekly thing here, we're down almost 6% for the week. So it probably was due to Chase, JP Morgan's earnings report, maybe is what I'm thinking. But you have this huge rip down yesterday, and now we're consolidating in this range. So Visa could be something that you might want to put on your chart. You know, you do have you have an air pocket now right here. Don't always think that bull flags or bear flags break in the direction of the continuation. They don't always do that. You want to play this according to the price action and what's happening in the market, and then also look in the sector ETF, the XLF. If everybody's moving up, then you might want to actually look at the possibility that this actually breaks up, retests, and then decides to move up. But right now, because most bear flags actually do break in the downward direction, the play on this actually right now is, without any information about what's going on in the markets, is down. On top of that, you can see that we're looking at some weakness here in the RSI. We have a nice squeeze. That's what the yellow dots mean, squeeze. You can see huge amount of weakness over here on the 4-hour chart, and also that it's really been it's been in a squeeze now through the weekly chart forever, which means that you know, you could see a huge pullback on this. If I would preface that with the idea that the stock market as a whole sees weakness. And that's all I have for you for today. So I hope you have a great day trading. Good luck with everything. Remember that this is not financial advice, but